Hello, Internet. Welcome back to another episode of Saybrock Teaches You to Play 4th Edition. We're getting into Combat Part 2 today. We're going to do, not to put too fine a point on it, this is the meat of the show. This is the main course. We're going to talk about actions. The default actions available to anyone. All right? This is where you're going to see a big difference. If you are primarily familiar with 5th edition, this is where you're going to see the greatest divergence in the system thus far. So, to start off with, before we get into the list of actions, I do want to talk about action points. I'm almost certainly have touched on this in some of the other videos, but a very important thing is action points. Every player character has an action point at the start of every adventuring day. You get an additional action point if you go 2 encounters without taking a long rest. That's called a milestone. That's what a milestone is in this system. It has nothing to do with XP. 2 encounters without a long rest is a milestone. Milestones do a few other things. Notably, they allow you to use additional daily magic items or additional daily magic item powers. Because each daily magic item power can only be used once a day, but the character can also only use 1 daily magic item power per day, plus 1 for every milestone that they get. And then they also get additional uses as they increase in level. So a Paragon tier character gets 2 at the start of the day. An Epic character gets 3 at the start of the day. Those are all increased by the number of milestones that you've had. But you also get action points during milestones, and that's the main thing you're going to be worried about. Action points can be spent once per encounter to take an additional action. Any action, standard action, move action, minor action, you take whatever action you want. This is directly analogous to the 5th edition fighters' action surge, but everyone gets it. Why is it okay for everyone to get it? Because the game doesn't assume that some people's actions are more valuable than other people's actions, so it's fine for everyone to have access to this mechanic. I'm going to do a video some other time about this, but this action points being available to everyone instead of being a class feature for specific classes is an indication that this game respects everyone equally. So, that's action points. You can only spend 1 per encounter, but you can build them up so you can spend them in subsequent encounters instead of only every other encounter. So, we'll start at the beginning. We're going to do this in alphabetical order. Aid Another. Aid Another is the help out action. It is a standard action. You choose a character. Choose a character within your melee reach, and make a melee attack versus AC 10. So this does not scale with level. This is always AC 10, which means that you can only fail on a nat 1 after a certain point, and it's very easy even from the beginning. It's a formality. There's generally a 5% chance that you're not going to succeed at this. If you succeed, deal no damage, but choose 1 ally. That ally gets +2 bonus to her next attack against the next attack roll against the target, or to all defenses against the target's next attack. So basically, it's you go up, you make an attack roll against an enemy, and either one of your allies gets +2 to their next attack against that, or gets +2 to all their defenses against that character's next attack. You can also do this with skills or ability checks, similarly against a DC 10, and also provides a +2 bonus to your ally's check to accomplish this task. So that is Aid Another. Next is basic attack. You can make a melee basic attack or a ranged basic attack. Melee basic attacks use strength. Ranged basic attacks use dex. Both use weapons. They are otherwise pretty much identical. Melee basic attacks get used by the system more often than ranged basic attacks. Ranged basic attacks usually have to be called for by like a specific power or ability. Melee basic attacks get used for opportunity attacks and charging and things like that. So, make your basic attack. I believe I already talked about the anatomy of a power, but they are basically as low level as it gets. They have no extra abilities. You use your ability mod plus you get all your bonuses to hit as normal. They both target AC. They both deal 1 weapon die of damage plus relevant mods. They both do scale to 2 weapon dice of damage at level 21, just like all at-will attacks do. But otherwise, they have no special effects. Next is Bull Rush. This is your push somebody ability. It says you can target Bull Rush, or you can Bull Rush a target adjacent to you that is smaller than you, the same size category as you, or 1 size category larger than you. You make a strength attack versus their fortitude defense. Do not add any modifiers for the weapon you use. So this is not a weapon attack. It actually isn't even a power. This is one of the few times you get to make an attack roll, like this and Aid Another. You get to make an attack roll without using a power. It's very rare, but it does happen. Interestingly, Aid Another does use a melee basic attack, so it does refer to that, which is a power. But this is not a power, which means that you are not using any of your weapon or implement bonuses, so your attack roll is going to be a little bit lower than you might be used to. It does target their fortitude defense, so it is not a weapon attack versus fortitude, which would be quite strong. Remember that fortitude, reflex, and will are generally going to be lower than AC, often by about 2 points, depending on the specific type of monster. So it is fine that it doesn't use your weapon. It's not great at higher levels as you scale up, because you won't be getting your enhancement bonus, and the math kind of assumes you're always getting your enhancement bonus. I believe if you are using inherent bonuses from the Dark Sun setting, that the inherent bonus would still apply to this. But otherwise, technically the bonus on Bull Rush is going to be quite low, which means that as you level up, it's going to not scale fast enough to stay useful. So this is mostly a low-level technique. But basically, if you hit, you push the target 1 square, and then you shift into the vacated space. Charge. Charge is excellent. So, I'm excited about Charge. Let me tell you about Charge. If you don't know about Charge, you're about to know about Charge. So, Charge is you move your speed as part of the charge. This is a standard action. You move your speed as part of the charge and make a melee basic attack or a Bull Rush attempt at the end of the charge. You get a +1 to your attack roll for charging. You must move at least 2 squares from your starting position, and you must move directly to the nearest square from which you can attack the enemy. So if you are too close to the enemy, you can't charge, though you can, as a separate action, say take a move action a few spaces away, back up, scrape at the ground a little bit if it helps, and then you move at least 2 spaces towards the enemy to the nearest space from which you can attack. It's one of the few times when your movement is kind of restricted in this way. You have to move by the most direct path to your target, and you must stop as soon as you are able to attack them. This is really cool for a couple of reasons. One more thing. Once you have charged, you cannot take any more actions on your turn. Your turn is done, even if you have other actions left to spend, unless you spend an action point. You can action point and then do other stuff if you wish. So charging is really cool for a couple of reasons. It really helps keep melee characters viable, because what you don't want in a system that encourages the melee fantasy is ranged characters that are able to sort of back up and kite the melee characters, especially if they have any kind of control effects, like the ability to, stun or daze you or slow you. So they're just backing up, shooting you, and you're a melee character. You have to choose between either double moving and not attacking, or moving and defending, and then they maintain that distance. You never get to them. You never get to just move up and have your turn, have your full action. What charging allows you to do is you can move and then charge, because you move with your move action, charge with your standard action. You get your full movement plus a melee basic attack with a bonus on top. It's so strong. If you aren't planning on if you aren't planning on really benefiting from whatever attack you're planning on using, you might just charge, even if you could move up and do a regular attack. If, let's say whatever at-will ability you're about to use either has effects that don't matter, or just wouldn't be as valuable as a +1 to hit, you can charge. It's a great tool to have in your pocket, and it really helps accentuate the melee fantasy. It's an important thing to have in the game. Next is coup de grace. This is, I would say, pretty rarely used. Um, you have to target a helpless target, which means basically someone who's been knocked out already. Uh, and if you hit, you score a critical hit. And if you deal damage greater than or equal to the target's bloodied value, the target dies. So yeah, if you have someone knocked out, you can try to one-shot them and kill them if they aren't already dead for some reason. Standard practice in 4th edition is once an NPC or a monster hits 0, they're kind of assumed dead unless the player wants to take them alive. I like to think of it, and this is a bit of philosophizing for me, I like to think of it as they do make death saves, but they're kind of doomed unless someone stops them from dying within a reasonable amount of time. So, like, if the party wants to take someone alive, it's the same hit, same drop them down. They're going to be making death saves. Maybe they stabilize, maybe they don't. But before they can die, the players are going to get to them. Coup de grace are going to be very, very rarely used because how often do you need to hit someone who is helpless? This would be used against someone who is like sleeping. If you're like sneaking into an area and you find a sleeping target and you need to gack them, that's probably when you would use a coup de grace. Because then you have a reasonable chance. Like some classes have a reasonable chance of doing a target's bloodied value in a single hit, especially on an automatic crit. Next is crawl. If you are prone and you don't want to stand up or can't stand up, then you would crawl and you move up to half your speed as a move action. You provoke opportunity attacks as normal. That's crawl. You move half your speed while prone. So that is if you like to go through a low area that you can't stand up in, you can crawl through that at half speed. There are a few effects that can knock you prone and prevent you from standing back up for an amount of time. So in that case, if you wanted to move, you have to crawl. Next is delay. So delay is different than holding an action or readying an action. Delay takes your entire turn and scoots it later in the round. So there's some issues with that, especially because many durations refer to the start of or the end of your turn, and if that is shifting around, then that can create issues, let us say. So there's a whole, let me show you here. There's a whole section here about like how to manage that kind of stuff. So you have you delay your entire turn, you coming back into the initiative order, losing a delayed turn. So if you don't take so basically what it is, you say I'm delaying, and okay, you're out of initiative, and then you choose when you want to come back in. Like right after a creature finishes their turn, you say, all right, I'm coming in now. If you don't do that by the time your next turn would come around, you just lose that turn and you go back into initiative. You can delay again if you want, but you're still not doing anything. At the moment you delay, you carry out your start of turn normally. So start of turn is usually when bad stuff is happening to you, like ongoing damage, anything like that is going to happen at the start of your turn. So delaying does not push that later. You can't use the delay action to sort of cheese that out at all. So those happen automatically, but the end of turn benefits, you don't have a normal end of turn. Instead, the things you do at the end of your turn happen at 2 separate times. So beneficial effects end when you use the delay action. They're done. You cannot extend beneficial effects that would end at the end of your turn by delaying. Sustained effects when you delay, you can't sustain a power if you delay. So yeah, you can't cheese out extra time out of that. Harmful effects continue until after you act. So after you return to the initiative order and take your actions, end effects that last until the end of your turn that are harmful to you. For example, if an enemy stunned you until the end of your next turn, the stunned condition ends. You can't avoid a harmful effect by delaying. And then you make saving throws after you act. So that's something you normally do at the end of your turn. You get to do that after you actually take your turn rather than after you delay. So it's pretty well insulated against any sort of like abuse or cheesing. You pretty much never benefit from delaying in order to sort of, play off of this, the meta mechanics of like when effects end or when they trigger. It's always worse for you that way. Next is escape. That's escape from a grab, which is an acrobatics or athletics check versus the it's acrobatics versus reflex or athletics versus fortitude. So basically, do you want to be slippery versus their ability to grab onto you, or do you want to be strong in versus their ability to hold? You get to choose as the escaper. If you succeed, you end the grab and can shift as part of the move action. This is a move action to escape. So I believe in 5th edition, escaping a grab is an action, which means you aren't going to be able to attack during that turn. In this, it's a move action. So if you succeed on your first try, you get to shift, which means your action isn't even wasted. And if you fail, you can try again. You can actually try twice. We're going to move over here. Next in alphabetical order, conveniently, is grabbing. It is a strength attack versus reflex. If you succeed, you have to have a free hand to grab, of course, and you immobilize the target. Immobilize is a condition, which I kind of breezed over in the last video. Immobilize means your speed is 0 and can't be improved by any means. So as long as you have someone grab, their speed is 0. They can still get out by hang on. Let me double check, because it might actually be more than that, because there are effects that move you a set number of spaces without caring about your move speed. So let me read the immobilized condition. You can't move from your space. So actually, all right, I was incorrect. It has nothing to do with your speed. You can't move from your space, although you can teleport and be forced to move by a push-pull or a slide. Excuse me. So once you grab them, they can't move from that space voluntarily, unless they can teleport. You can, as a standard action, move a grabbed target. You make a strength check versus their fortitude, and move up to half your speed and pull the grabbed target with you. So as you move, you can pull them. Yes, this way would be a better illustration. You can move back and pull them with you. And you can kind of do a little bit of side to side with it. There's some play there in certain circumstances because of the way that diagonals work in this game. But yeah, as a standard action, you can move while you are grabbing someone. Opportunity attack. This is an opportunity action, which I did go into in the last video. You have one opportunity action per creature's turn. 99% of the time when you do an opportunity action, it's going to be this. There are a few powers out there that are opportunity actions. They're very rare. They're exceedingly uncommon. So it is a melee basic attack, and here's how you provoke opportunity attacks. If you leave a space adjacent to a hostile creature, an enemy, if you will, that's it. Leave any space adjacent to an enemy, and they get to make an opportunity attack against you. You only get one per creature's turn, but you get one on every creature's turn. So if you are here, and you've got 5 enemies here, and they really want to get over here, because whatever the goal is over here, you have to defend this hallway. You aren't big enough to cover it all. Every time one of them tries to run past you, you get to hit them. Every one, because they're all separate turns. You have to be able to attack once per combatant's turn. It does interrupt the target's action. Interrupt is a key phrase. It is a game term, which means that the opportunity attack takes place before the movement that triggers it, which is important because obviously if they move out of your reach, now you can't hit them. So if it happened after the movement, it just wouldn't work. So it does happen before they move. This is important for things that, if you are a fighter, for example, and you can immobilize, or you can stop movement if you hit with an opportunity attack, which fighters can do, baseline, then they stop adjacent to you. They don't get away at all. Occasionally, there will be monsters with what is called threatening reach. This means that they threaten more than just the spaces around them. Because if you have a polearm, you have 10-foot reach, or 2 space reach, but you still only make opportunity attacks in adjacent spaces. Some specific monsters have an ability called threatening reach, which allows them to cover the entire area of their reach, rather than just adjacent spaces. But it will say that in the monster's stat block. You can ready an action. This is a standard action, and it works more or less like it does in 5th edition. You specify what action you are going to take and the circumstances under which you are going to take it, and then if those circumstances come up before your next turn, you can use your immediate action to fire it off. Immediate action is the more directly analogous action to 5th edition's reaction, because it is once per round, just like a reaction is. Immediate actions, if you don't remember from my previous video, immediate actions can be either interrupts or reactions. Interrupts take place before the triggering event, and reactions take place after the triggering event. I don't remember whether I think readied actions are reactions. Yes, it is an immediate reaction. It takes place after the triggering event. So you have to phrase it in a way that when you take your readied action, it's still going to be like legal and viable after the thing that you are readying against. And you probably can't prevent the thing that you are readying against. You might be able to ready against something that would naturally happen before, like, let's say enemies are trying to get into your room and you want to stop them. If you want to like throw down a wall spell, you can say, if any enemies get within one space of that doorway, I'm going to cast a wall. And then they get within one space of the doorway, mid-action, you get to cast that wall and stop them from getting in. The next action in the list is run. This is really cool. You're going to like this. I guarantee it. You're going to like this. This is a move action. So for the same action that you can use to move your normal speed, you can choose to move your speed +2. You can just go faster. You can choose to book it. You move your speed +2 spaces. But naturally, there is a drawback. You take a -5 penalty to attack rolls until the start of your next turn, and you grant combat advantage until the start of your next turn. Combat advantage it's not great. By which I mean granting combat advantage is not great. You don't really want to do that. -5 penalty to attack rolls is very severe. But that is somewhat mitigated by the fact that you can, in many cases, attack and then run. Depending on the specific circumstances and why you are running. Maybe you can't. But if you are able to attack and then run, you don't suffer the penalty. Easy enough. But you would suffer that penalty on any opportunity attacks that you need to make before the start of your next turn. Next is Second Wind. Oh, Second Wind. Second Wind is a standard action. It is once per encounter only. Anyone can do this. You spend a healing surge, heal for your healing surge value, and get a +2 bonus to all of your defenses until the start of your next turn. It's so good. Now, you're not going to be doing this all the time. It's not ideal. It honestly isn't. It is a standard action, which means that you're not attacking that turn unless you're spending an action point. But even so, you're not attacking twice. It takes up an attack. And things that take up an attack but are not attacks themselves, that's a high cost. But in the circumstances where you need it, you really need it. +2 to all defenses and healing for a quarter of your max hit points. That is a huge swing of momentum. All player characters can do this, remember. This is not like the fighter going, Second Wind, I'm going to heal up a little bit because that's a special thing that I can do. No, everyone can do this. If you have more hit points, obviously, healing surges favor those with more hit points. You actually get more healing out of it. The really cool thing about this actually is dwarves. If you are a dwarf, you get to do this as a minor action. Isn't that fun? It's actually one of the main draws for being a dwarf. There are multiple draws for being a dwarf, don't get me wrong, but it is the main draw for being a dwarf, is being able to do this as a minor action. Second Wind can also be triggered by a heal action. I believe if you are trained in healing, I think you have to be trained, you can go trigger someone else's Second Wind. They get to heal up for their healing surge, but they don't get the +2 to their defenses. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to skip a few, and then I'm going to come back, because I want to talk about total defense. In the context of Second Wind, total defense is something you can do all the time. It is also a standard action, and it also gives you +2 to all your defenses. You can do it as many times as you want, but you don't heal. So basically what they've done is they've rolled total defense into Second Wind. When you Second Wind, you also total defense. You're healing and doing another standard action, or getting the benefit of another standard action at the same time, which I think is really cool. So if you need to like just bunker down and you don't care about offense for some reason, like there's scenarios where that could be the case, you can do total defense turn after turn after turn if you need to. It's hard to imagine a scenario where that would be the case, but you can. Next is shift. Shift is like a regular move, except you only move one space and don't provoke opportunity attacks. Now, shifting is an action. Shifting is the name of an action where you move one space, you don't provoke opportunity attacks. It is a full move action where you only move one space safely. But shifting is also a form of movement. So a lot of powers and effects will allow someone to shift a certain number of spaces. Shifting never provokes opportunity attacks. So it is a form of movement, but it's also the name of a specific action that you can take. You shift one space. And that is a move action to do. So if you, let's say you're a ranged character, ranged attacks provoke opportunity attacks from enemies. Oh, you've got a couple of enemies near you. You don't want to provoke 2 opportunity attacks. That's crazy. I'm going to shift back one space. Now I'm not adjacent to any enemies, and I can shoot freely or cast my spells or whatever it is that I'm doing. So you do have that option. Now, you're only a couple of spaces away from them, so you're still in danger. But it allows you to get that breathing room if you have space to back up into. If you're up against a wall, might not be an option. Next is squeeze. This is pretty niche. If you're in a space that is too small for your character, you move at half speed. You get the -5 penalty to attack rolls as if you are running. You grant combat advantage just like if you are running. So it's kind of like running, except you only move half your speed. But you get into areas that you wouldn't normally be able to get into. And there are sort of minimum dimensions that you'd be able to squeeze into. It hasn't listed here. It's not important. Squeezing, I think, has come up once in the multiple campaigns that I've run, so it's not a big deal. Next is stand up. If you're prone, move action, stand up. It does not provoke. You stand up into, if your space is unoccupied, you stand up in your space. Otherwise, you stand up in the nearest unoccupied space. You shift one square as part of the move action, and then just stand up in an adjacent occupied space. If your space and all adjacent spaces are occupied by other creatures, you can't stand up. So yeah, you can, if you get knocked prone and then like a whole like rave party comes in and there's like dancing and there's no room, you can't stand up. Sorry. Next, total defense, which we've already talked about. Next is use a power. Now this is, I mean, it's kind of weird that they put it in here. Each power specifies what kind of action it is and what it does. So it's weird that it's in the list, but it's in the list, so I mentioned it. That's why I mentioned it. Next is walk. This is your normal movement. You move your speed in spaces. You provoke opportunity attacks as normal. There are no other benefits. There are no other effects. So those are all the actions in combat. Now, did I go over... I don't think I went over healing in my last video, so I'll go ahead and touch on that. It's pretty quick. Temporary hit points, real quick. They work pretty much exactly like they do in 5th edition. They last 5 minutes or until you finish a short rest. They don't stack with each other. There is one source of temporary hit points in the entire game that I'm aware of that does stack with itself. It's a very special case. I'm not going to go into it. Otherwise, temporary hit points never stack with each other. Damage and healing, death and dying. So here's how death and dying works. And yeah, that'll be the end of the combat section. So let me go ahead and close the book and set this over here. I don't need that no more. I can talk about this. So just like in 5th edition, there are no negative hit points. It's weird that I feel like I have to say that. I originally learned D&D in 3rd edition where there were negative hit points. Sorry, I'm wrong. There are negative hit points. There are negative hit points. Man, it's been that long. So there are negative hit points in 4th edition. If you are knocked down, you keep track of how far down you have been reduced. If you ever get to negative your bloodied value, so negative half your maximum, you die. You make death saves as normal while unconscious. You are bleeding out, but also you might just die from taking too much damage. That's still a thing. Death saves work more or less like they do in 5th. A 9 or less is a failure. A 10 plus is a success. roll. I believe a nat 1 doesn't do anything, but a nat 20 lets you spend a. I know I put it away. I did. I put the book away, and then fully forgot how to fucking play this game. Uh, so, yeah, lower than a 10. Nat 1 doesn't do anything. Natural 20 is spend a healing surge. So you know how in 5th edition you get 1 hit point back on a natural 20? In this, you spend a healing surge. So you're at 25% max hit points. So you actually are back in the fight instead of being like, oh, I will go down if anything happens to me again. You're still prone, and when you do so, you're considered to have 0 hit points. Oh, sorry. I do need to touch on this. Even though there are negative hit points, healing always still starts from 0. So you can't heal someone and fail to get them back up. They start from 0 and count up. Death saving throws happen at the end of your turn, so you won't have a turn. You're still no longer dying. Have no healing surges left. Your condition doesn't change. Interesting. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. So it's important to think about how much more versatile characters are baseline. In particular, movement options. Compared to 5th edition, you're going to find that not being able to split up your movement at first feels a lot more restrictive, but then you realize you actually have a wealth of movement options now in place of just being able to do a normal move. You have your shift, which doesn't take your action to do. You know, in 5th edition, you have the disengage action, so you can't attack if you try to get away from an enemy safely. In this, you shift 1 space as a move action. If you want to move further, you can shift away 1 space and then do your full move. But you don't have to. You can just shift away 1 space and then use your standard action as normal. One more thing about death saves. Death saves are cleared when you finish a long rest. Or sorry, when you finish a rest. When you finish any rest. Long rest, short rest, whatever. So 5 minutes, you clear your death saves. What that means is if you go down and you fail a death save and then you get healed and you stand back up, you still have that failed death save. And you still die if you hit 3. So it's still dangerous to go down. You don't reset after healing. You reset when you finish a rest. This can come up. Quick story, I once had a guy who I was running a campaign and I had a character, I don't even remember what the specific backstory was. He had like a weapon that was infused with the power of death itself. And what I did was, on a critical hit, if you get hit by a crit with this weapon, you would just automatically fail a death save. That was hella scary for the players, because this is something, we can just die regardless of our health points. I mean, it was kind of a bluff, because like, how often am I going to crit how often am I going to crit one specific character in a single fight? It's not going to make a big difference, and indeed it did not. But it was a good way to scare the players, because you can have death saves while conscious and while you have hit points. You can have failed death saves still. Which also means that it's not a good idea to let people get to 0. You do want to prevent them from getting to 0 and actually prevent them from making those rolls. You can't just like, they're down, I'll heal them in a bit once we deal with this. No, you really need to get your allies up as fast as possible, preferably before their turn. Not just to get their action back, but to stop them from potentially dying. So, anyways, that's combat in a nutshell. That's combat part 2. That's all the actions and a little bit on damage and healing. Next, I would like to talk about rituals. And then, I think, I want to go into some of the classes that I like, some of the player options that I like, and actually start talking about the content and not just the rules framework. So, you have that to look forward to.